So good morning, Jan. Thank you very much for your presentation. You have a lot of experience in the fashion industry as a consultant. And my first question is, why do you do what you do?
Say I started being a consultant basically 4 years ago. Before that, I was always an executive in various fashion companies. But I realized that with many different companies, you learn so many different things. Yeah, that it's very interesting to be engaged with various companies at the same time, from a very small designer-owned, driven small brand to the large global corporation. Sometimes there are even things that are very comparable, the same things that both are struggling with. But very often you have a very widespread set of experiences and learnings that you can always benefit from, and that's why I enjoy working with many different companies, but also from different industries. Fashion industry mostly, but also fast-moving consumer goods in general. Also, let's say jewelry, and other things.
Excellent. So you enjoy doing multiple things, and having seen many companies, what do you see as the main trends in the fashion industry?
Okay, let's say I'm not an expert on basically saying this is going to sell or that is not going to sell. Let's say the industry is moving in the direction of getting way more responsive to the customer from a timing perspective. We used to work with calendars that were dictated by seasons. So we had the summer season, the winter season, and the whole industry was following that rhythm, developing 1 year in advance what we're going to sell 1 year later. And this is basically completely disrupted. So we basically ideally want to develop and produce in the store what the customer will buy there, or the customer will configure and buy online what he wants to have delivered tomorrow, he or she. So basically the time span between the creation moment and the money moment is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And this is all over the place.
So what has mainly changed from a consumer perspective in terms of timing?
I think the patience level has completely disappeared. I mean, we see that ourselves as customer. We are even paying a premium on Amazon to be a prime customer, to not have to wait until tomorrow to have delivery today. And this kind of mentality has made it into our whole behavior. We are not patient anymore. So I think the whole problem got very transparent when I think Philip Bailey started with Burberry's as a first kind of fashion company to sell off the catwalk. The system so far showed things that the customer could find in the store half a year later. So he started disrupting the system by saying, you can buy now what I'm showing. That's it.
So customers want things faster and faster. You also talked about fast fashion, and you said that 96% of the volume is still kind of unbranded or fast fashion. So what do you see in terms of sustainability versus fast fashion? What are the developments in this area?
Okay, let's say first to these percentages. I think it's not fast fashion. I think premium and luxury, let's say branded fashion, is only like 4% of the volume and 8% of the value of the total fashion, or let's say apparel segment. That's why also the statistics that we find from importing associations, the data that we find, very often the luxury companies you don't even see because the volumes are so petite. I think the fast fashion movement, and we've seen very many publications about that, especially in the last months, also from the World Economic Forum, that the fashion industry is the #1 polluter of the planet. I think it even comes before the food industry. So I think it's a kind of paradigm. On one side, we want to be sustainable. On the other side, we're having single-piece shipment that we even ship back and forth because we know that the online world has a high return rate. So it's a kind of total paradox that on one side we want to be more sustainable and want to be eco-friendly. On the other side, we created or we drove an industry that is selling fashion as a disposable item. So it's better to buy a new T-shirt than to wash it. That's basically the message. So it's going in completely different directions.
And do you think this industry will become more sustainable, or is it basically not possible from a financial perspective?
I wouldn't say from a financial perspective, but as the customer, as the market, is so much driven for newness and new things and so superficial, also thanks to the way how people present themselves on social media, nobody digs deeper anymore. Nobody looks at the values. Everybody's just, let's say, wants to be the star of the moment. And that's why I think it's very, very hard how you ever want to turn that back again into a kind of value-driven society. It's very, I wouldn't even know how to reply to that.
I can imagine that's very difficult. And what is also difficult maybe for entrepreneurs in the brick-and-mortar space to survive, as you mentioned in your talk. So Emerce also a lot about online business. So how do you see the future of online versus brick and mortar in fashion?
I think that has. I think since I'm in the industry, everybody said brick and mortar is dead, which we still have it today, and I think it's people won't spend their whole life in front of a screen, or in front of a cell phone screen, or even a watch screen. I think it's more changing into more experience level, and we've seen that many retail spaces that are successful are offering way more than just a boring shop. So they are offering experience, story, coffee, mix, whatever kind of things. I think that the idea or the approach is changing, but it will always be there because people will use it as a meeting point. As it will maybe change the content. We've seen that even some companies that started online are now even going brick and mortar. So by opening shops like Amazon, trying shops. So I think there will always be a coexistence. The percentages might change. Maybe people praised for some years back that everything will be online, and maybe in the future will be a combination of both. That one will tell the story and the other will supply the products. So it's a.
I can imagine. So it will always be a combination, but the shops need to be a bit more experiential.
I think the shops are sometimes necessary to create the brand, because very often, what does this brand stand for? For example, if you sell your brand on a platform like Zalando, your brand is using the Zalando background, the Zalando screen, so it loses actually the story around it. If, for example, if you take a very story-driven or image-driven company like Tommy Hilfiger, they need their Tommy family, their kind of East Coast prep setting around to promote their products. So I think it has to be a combination of both. They need their own space to tell their story, but they need the other space to sell their products.
So offline is still important to tell story, create a brand, create trust. And I've seen you've worked for Hugo Boss, which is a famous company, and I'm very curious to know what is the main thing you learned from working at Hugo Boss?
Hugo Boss is a very engineering-driven company, and what I learned at Hugo Boss for sure is the whole manufacturing landscape. So Hugo Boss is a very product content-driven company, being a manufacturer themselves. They just, it's not a buying house. So they're not buying products only, they know how to manufacture. So the deepness of the quality, but also I would say still today, I would say Hugo Boss in many cases is the benchmark of, wouldn't say perfection, but close to perfection processes. It's a machine. And for me, it's in very many aspects still a benchmark. I've just been to Hong Kong 2 weeks ago, where I saw the presentation actually of the factory that I had the pleasure of starting, basically as a project manager. I was, let's say, part of the building team of that factory in Turkey, and I saw Joachim Hensch of Hugo Boss, who's the managing director now, taking it on the next level of being a showcase of Industry 4.0 manufacturing, a total AI-driven digital company. So I think Hugo Boss is always kind of to find the last edge of the technical possibilities using state-of-the-art modern technology to mingle it with craftsmanship and manufacturing.
Very cool. So it's about perfectionism, high product quality, and deep knowledge of engineering and manufacturing. Thank you very much. And maybe my last question: what would be your advice to entrepreneurs in the fashion industry? If you want to grow your business, what would be your main advice?
I think it's very important to have a story, a true story to tell, and to have something like a uniqueness factor. Something. Why should people buy from you and not from somebody else? What is it that makes your company unique? I think the uniqueness. And the story behind is very important, especially for a startup, because I mean everybody can buy clothing today and produce clothing. That's not a myth, but it's the kind of story you tell that makes it different from the others.
Excellent. So having and telling a unique story is very important. Thank you very much, Jan, for your time.
Thank you.